round number 5 of the Rochester Open 2022 game recap. I have the black pieces against Natasha Mattis. She's rated 2068, but her rating has been as high as 2200. So I knew this was going to be a very tough game. And let's jump right into it. So here we see d4, d5, c4, c6. I'm starting out with the Slav defense. And after knight to f3, I go into the triangle defense. This looks a lot like game number 3 because she plays queen to c2. This is the exact same thing that OK played in round 3. And I decided to go for the same setup, going for a Stonewall Dutch. I should mention, this is round number 5 of the recaps. For another day or two, the ChessGoals courses will be 35% off. It's a sale for the recaps. Go to courses.chessgoals.com, link in the description, coupon code OPEN, OPEN. It's 35% off all the courses, and you can try them out for free. So the course recommendation here is d takes c4, and after queen takes c4, knight to f6. And the idea is if white goes for this Catalan setup, there's a very quick b5 that we can play, and then eventually we're going to go for the c-pawn break. In this type of position, black is already equalized, and I prefer black. It's actually white that's kind of walking a tightrope to try to keep equality. Look at that bishop contesting the bishop on g2. In addition to this nice queenside space for black, white has wasted a few moves with moving the queen around. So that's part of our dynamic Slav course. I felt like I was comfortable in round 3 against the National Master playing the Stonewall, so I went for the same thing. Stonewall Dutch. And I give my opponent a lot of credit here. She played this really well in a nice strategic game. So knight f6, pawn to b3. So the idea here is bishop to a3 can be played, trying to trade off the dark squared bishops. And that's my good bishop on d6. So if you remember round 3, my opponent played bishop to f4, trading off the dark square bishops this way. Keep this in mind. When you face a Stonewall from the white side, you typically do want to try to trade off the good bishop, this one on d6, and leave black with only the c8 bishop. Here I castle. This is not playable immediately because I can take, and after knight takes, queen a5 attacks the knight and checks the king at the same time. So this is a mistake that I've seen quite a bit in blitz games. You go bishop a3 here before you castle as white, and you actually drop a piece. So she castles first, queen e7, preventing the bishop from coming out. Pawn to a4. Now, this is a good takeaway for me. I haven't played a ton of Stonewall Dutch games. I created the course on the Dutch. I haven't implemented the course in my own practice because I just don't play a lot of chess. I spend most of my time working on chess goals and helping other people, but I need more experience in these structures. Pawn to a5 is the best move. And the idea is you want to blockade the dark squares. Don't allow white to play an easy b4. And let's say bishop to a3 is played. There's now bishop takes a3. And the issue for white here, and we'll see this in the game line too, neither of these pieces really wants to end up on a3. So it costs white a couple moves just to trade off the dark square bishops. So let's say knight takes a3 is played. I can go knight to d7. Now that knight has to move again. Pawn to b6. The knight finally finds a square that it likes, knight to d2. And then I can play knight e4 and c5. And this bishop is going to come to b7 most likely. Perfectly safe there. This position is very close to equal. So this is how I should play the position. Get that pawn up on a5. And I did it in game number 3. I had the right idea with the light square bishop. For some reason, I just didn't execute it in this game. So I played knight to e4 instead. And my idea here is I'm trying to start an attack on the king side. So when the knight's on e4, I'm looking to play g5, g4, sometimes h5, h4, start an attack over here, while hopefully keeping things locked up over on the queen side. So if white starts to get these pawns rolling, if I can keep the queen side locked up and get my pawns going on the king side, that's the type of game I want. It's a very dynamic position where either I'm getting checkmate or white's winning on the queen side. So now bishop to a3 was played, and I capture because I knew that this knight did not want to be on a3 and the rook didn't want to be there either. Knight d7, knight b1. Now here again, a5, top move, engine saying that's equal, followed by b6, bishop to b7, and then play g5. So I really get what I want on the king side, and I have an improved queen side. This is something that I need to remember, and I think after this game, I'm definitely going to remember. You got to go a5 and b6. I believe the reason I didn't play it is I felt like maybe c5 could be played and this pawn becomes a weakness. But what I failed to realize, and this is a typical Stonewall Dutch idea, and I know this idea too, I just didn't connect the dots during the game. If c5 is ever played, there's no tension in the center now, right? So none of these pawns are threatening to capture each other. Now I can play pawn to e5, attacking this weakest pawn of the white pawn chain here. And this is an advantage for black. So I should be happy to see c5. That a5 pawn is not going to get captured anytime soon. It's defended by the rook on a8. And it's definitely black that's playing for the advantage now. So I got to remember that. Pawn to a5 here. Queen to f6. The first mistake I think of the game, I'm trying to be sneaky. I'm thinking knight e1 wants to be played, followed by f3, e4, trying to chip away at these pawns. That's kind of a typical idea in these structures. I'm using my queen to pressure the d pawn, trying to tie down this knight. e3 was played, and now all of a sudden my queen's not doing much on f6. So this queen to f6 move didn't help me a ton. And actually white had pawn to a5 here, taking advantage of the fact that I didn't play a5. Another thing I was looking at is I wanted to keep full control of this e5 square. So if the knight wants to head here, currently it can't because I would win a pawn. All right, so now I go g5. I think that's a good move. a5, again, a little bit stronger. So move after move, I need to find a5. Knight d2. Again, a5 was top move. This was second. Knight to h4. This move I didn't really like facing during the game because what I'm trying to think here is how do I get my kingside attack going? I would much rather see the knight heading back to e1. At least that's what I was thinking during the game, because then I can play h5, h4 and get my attack. After knight h4, how do I get that knight out of there? I don't have a dark square bishop, and these knights aren't ready to attack this guy anytime soon. I'd actually have to move the rook, play knight f8, play knight g6 just to offer a knight trade. That's 3 moves, and my attack hasn't really fully developed yet. So here I play queen to g5, another kind of poor queen move in my opinion. Um, I think what I was planning is if f3, I'm pressuring this e3 pawn, but white doesn't have to play f3. White's looking to play on the queen side. So here my opponent plays queen to d3. Again, a5 top move. I went knight d to f6, supporting my knight in the center. Pawn to f4. This was a strong move by white. Now I don't want to take on f3 because the knight can take. And actually, c takes d is a huge problem. And this bishop is bad and I don't have a kingside attack. So opening things up like this does not favor me at all. Here I play queen to g7. There is still this potential of a long-term h-pawn attack. That was kind of my idea. And at this point, there's a really nice strategic move here for white. And Natasha's father mentioned this after the game. Bishop takes e4. This is a good bishop for white. Trading the bishop off for this knight forces me to lock up these pawns in a scenario where my bishop is terrible against knights that can kind of jump around and get around all the pawns. So this would have been a very nice strategic idea for white, taking advantage of a good knight against bad bishop scenario. Instead, knight takes e4 was played, d takes e4, and now all of a sudden the position is close to equal. I definitely felt like I was behind here though and just trying to hold on to the draw. So here I play b6. Guess what the top move was? Pawn to a5. Again, every single move I should be playing a5. b4, top move, a5. I had a similar idea though. I played pawn to c5. And what I was thinking here is if this pawn is captured twice, I can scoop this up with my queen, with queen c7, come get this next. And this is actually an advantage for black. So I think c5 was a good idea if white takes twice. But there's a strong move here for white, and my opponent found it. She played pawn to b5. This locks in this c5 weakness. And really I have to be careful here because white has a potential pass pawn. There's 2 pawns coming down the board against just my a pawn, 2v1. If white creates a passed pawn, This could be a win for white. Here I play rook to d8, getting first rook on the open d file, so trying to control the open file. Rook to d1, now bishop to b7. So I'm connecting my rooks. And here, white's trying to double rooks on the d file. One thing that I'd calculated here, and this is pretty deep, so try to follow along, but it's something that you can do in your own games too. I was trying to calculate which imbalances do I want in terms of the piece trades. If you envision all of these major pieces traded off, look at the resulting position, bishop and knight against bishop and knight. If I'm able to blockade these queenside pawns, how do the bishop and knight for white get into the game? This bishop doesn't have any routes, right? It's completely boxed in by the pawns. This knight could go to g2, e1, c2, but see how my pawns are covering these squares and the white pawns are on the other squares? There's actually no route for that knight to get into the game. I can attack these two pawns. I have the option of playing e5 and maybe the option of playing h4. So I'm thinking it's a very low risk position if the queens and rooks come off the board. If the queens and rooks stay on the board, I might be losing because of this potential passed pawn. So here I trade rooks and offer the queen trade immediately. And after rook to d1, trade pawn to a5. I felt this was a critical move, making sure that these pawns are fixed on light squares and that there's no a5 coming up. Computer says it's actually a little bit better to play a6. And it's similar to what happened in the game, but this provides me a little flexibility because maybe my king later on can run in through the dark squares. So something I didn't appreciate, but I felt like I couldn't lose this position, and the computer does confirm that. So really, black should never lose this. Bishop f1. If the rook were to try to infiltrate, my king can come help out. He's coming over here next. Rook b6 is actually a scary move for white because this rook is almost trapped if it doesn't go right back to d6. But this kind of position is what white doesn't want because after the rook trade, my knight's heading to b6, double attacking those pawns. So white has to be careful here, and that's why she played bishop to f1, because after the rook trade, she calculated that that bishop needs to head to b3, defending both of those pawns. So it takes me 2 moves to get my king over here, offer the rook trade, but this bishop is ready to come to b3. So now the position is dead equal, 0.00. We've seen me try this in a couple games though already, rounds 1 through 3. I'm trying to grind this to see if I can create enough problems to play for the win. And if I win this game, it's going to be most likely a tie for first place. So there's a chance to win some big money if I'm able to pull off the win here. King f2, king c7, king e1, bishop c8. So what I'm doing is I'm routing this bishop around, bring it over to f7, and I'm thinking maybe I can use my knight to attack this pawn and then throw e5 up at the right moment, create some play. I'm not for sure I'm going to play it, but I can at least set up the threat and see what white does. And then here I changed my mind. I realized king and bishops are defending everything. I knew this should be a draw, but I'm trying to be creative and think, is there any way that I could play for the win here? I'm looking at ideas like knight to g6, trying to trade these knights. And I think I actually want the bishop on b7 now. So I've just rerouting this bishop back. Gets to b7, and I realize here, this is going to be too risky, I think. Knight f8, knight g6. The knight could actually just be captured. I don't think that gains me anything. If anything, maybe white brings their king over, plays h3, and somehow tries to play for a win. I mean, no, it should just be a draw. But instead, I went knight b6, repetition, draw agreed. So this game, I think white played really well. She never really gave me a chance to get much of an advantage at all. What I needed to find was a5. I think if I find a5, maybe I can play for an advantage at that point, even though with best play, the position is close to equal. So big takeaway there, play a5. Also, though, I don't think in the future I'm going to play the Stonewall Dutch against this Catalan setup. I'm going to try to follow the ChessGoals course and take on c4. I like these positions a lot better. I don't want to face the King Side V and Kettle when we have the Stonewall Dutch. That's the reason I've made it that way in the course. So that's going to be my plan going forward, unless I'm trying to like out prepare a certain opponent, or I know they're looking at these videos or the course and they're going to, study up on exactly what I'm doing. My plan going forward is going to be to take on C4. All right, so make sure to check out the courses, link in the description. They're 35% off for another day or two because this is the last recap of the Rochester Open. It's coupon code OPEN, OPEN, and you can preview all of the courses for free. So we have a nice course player. There's 6 different courses on there. This is coming out of the dynamic Slav course that we have. It's one of our more popular courses. Hope you guys check it out. Thanks for sticking around for the recaps. And coming up, we have JD recaps from his recent tournament. So make sure to stick around for those too. Have a good day.